So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I have another special guest. This is Leighton Welch, and he's the CTO of Tracer. And Tracer is a data aggregation and analytics company. So welcome to my channel. You're the second person I'm interviewing.
I love it.
See, Leighton, you're Leighton is someone who I really look up to because you are someone whom I think I want to be, you're in that position where I think I want to get to in the next 5 or 10 years. So that makes you very interesting to me. So, let's start out by talking a little bit about your early life and, how you got into the whole computer science thing, right?
Yeah.
So, did you always know you wanted to go into computer science and an engineering field, or found out?
Not explicitly. I
Right.
think I had never taken a computer science class until I got to college.
Okay.
So I didn't have any formal exposure, but there was still a piece of me that knew when I got there I was going to take like intro comp sci. So I don't know exactly where that came from or where I was drawn to it, but I knew that it was something I was interested in.
Okay. So when you were like faced with the option, you went with this.
Yeah.
Okay. And you did your bachelor's from Harvard,
hmm
right? So how was the experience there? Like, how was the whole, you know, learning experience at Harvard?
It was good. It was it's a big school, so it's kind of what you make of it.
Right.
The courses are large, sort of for the first half. Those intro classes are really big, but it was my first exposure to both of the things that I studied in school, which was computer science and economics. And I think that intersection is still kind of fascinating to me. I enjoy the problem solving aspect of computer science, but I also, for me, it's a little bit of a means to an end. Like I like the problem in the abstract sense, and programming is one of the more efficient ways that I've found to solve the problems that I'm interested in right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
And like, do you think that getting a bachelor's from Harvard kind of impacted your career, like gave you a boost? Because Harvard is a place where many, people want to learn from. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the quality of the education was hugely different than any of the other kind of
Right.
good universities in the US or across the world, but I think that it did two things. I think it gave me exposure to things that I was able to then run with.
Mhm.
And I think it helped me create a network of people who are also ambitious and like minded and starting companies and working at good companies. So I think it's the network and I think it's the exposure. And a little bit of the rubber stamp just providing the opportunity because I couldn't say that I was there.
Since we are talking about colleges, I just want to get your quick opinion on what you think about college education today and kind of how much it matters to get into computer science or engineering today, right? Because that does it really have the value that it used to have?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what the end goal
End goal,
is, for
right.
sure. Do I think that if you wanted to go start your own company, going to college is a requirement for engineering, not in terms of being able to implement, maybe in terms of being able to raise the money or, convince,
Right.
but I think less and less, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that it's narrower on the margin there.
Tell me about your, daily activities as a CTO. Like, what's on your daily calendar?
Yeah. We're small enough that it's still a little bit of everything.
Right,
There's a
right,
lot
right.
of hats, and it kind of changes as we bring on new clients and new people. But I think big picture, my focus is on product and then on people. It's really about, given the vision that we have, which we feel is really well in line with what the market is, and we think we're in a very strategic position there. It's how do we hire the right people and put them in the right positions to succeed. So I kind of split my time abstractly between product and people.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the skills, right? So, what are some of the skills that you think are required for a CTO, right? What are the most important skills that you think you have that's helped you become a good CTO?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of it is being an effective translator, and I think that's agnostic to CTO, but true in my position as well, where it's about making sure that everyone is kind of speaking the same language, whether that is, the client and our product team, or the
Okay.
product team and the engineering team, or right, like everyone is aligned on the same goal, but sometimes some of the inefficiency is just derived from people speaking slightly different languages, and that's a place where I feel very comfortable whether I'm, with the CEO of another company or I'm with their head of product or their head of engineering.
So it's like your role is more like bringing everything together, right? The clients, the company, make everybody feel comfortable and maybe on the same page. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think at some point, like when I started, I was the only employee, right? So for me, at that point, it was like, how much we got done was a derivative of how much work I could do, and at some point, there's that turning point where it's like, it doesn't matter how much I work; it matters how much we work, right? And so if it's a team of engineers, or a team of product or project manager, or whatever it is, it's how do I empower everybody to be more effective, and that's kind of why at this point it's very little to do with like the technical infrastructure, and it's a lot more about the people infrastructure and the product and just aligning everybody.
Also, and what is like one skill that you wished you had known or you wish to learn today? I asked this to Jeff too.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I still feel like I'm learning stuff every step of the way, which is part of what I love about this job. I certainly haven't figured it all out. I think in every one of the buckets that I've mentioned, it's kind of a new experience at each new clip in terms of size or revenue or number of clients or number of employees, right? So there's still plenty there. I think one of the things that, one of the things that has become truer and truer as we've gotten bigger is just like there's no such thing as over communicating, right? I think everyone wants to feel like they're informed and in the loop, whether that's on what's happening with our clients to what's happening with the most recent pushes, regardless of whether they're an engineer or a client success person.
So you would say communication, getting better at it, right?
Yeah, and I think establishing processes before you do them, right? So like when it was one person, our release process was very different than when it's 25.
Yeah.
But the turning point should be before it needs to.
Yeah, we're getting to that. The process is part.
Right.
Very interesting. Yeah. So this you've kind of taken this idea, a requirement, and transformed this to one amazing product that is profitable today. This huge company product, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, right? Like taking an idea and going to a profitable product. Right? So what is the general process, or what is the approach that you not process the approach that you took with this, with Tracer, like taking that starting step? Right?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like I got lucky because I had Gary and I had Jeff and I had kind of this environment where we could build the technology as part of Painter and then become Tracer when we were ready. So I'm definitely very grateful for that. But I think it's always been product first, right? It's always been, I knew that this was the problem. This is what I wanted to solve, and staying fairly narrow so that we could create something that had value. And so everything we've done has been a derivative of like that problem we wanted to solve.
Right. So I would say at an early stage itself, you kind of did you like start talking to users, and how do you do the value analysis, right? Find the correct product market fit, right? Because the reason I'm asking is that many people, like, ideas are cheap, right? Many people can come up with ideas, problems, right? But it has to apply on, like the value has to be recognized by your potential clients, right?
Yeah, I guess I didn't have to convince them of the problem; they convinced me of it. So I watched the inefficiency every day. So like it started because I had a friend who worked for Jeff at the time who was running ads, and he was waking up every morning and he was running reports and doing the same thing over and over. And he contacted me and said, "Hey, can you come automate this for me?"
Right.
And I came in and I wrote those scripts and got introduced to the market, and that's sort of how this whole thing happened. right? I saw that there was a huge gap between the quantity of dollars being spent and the quality of the technology tracking it. And that was like one of the many light bulb moments. But that was like, hey, this is an opportunity to create tech that exists in every other space, but is not in marketing.
So because this was like kind of obvious, like you already knew that this existed in a lot of places, right? This inefficiency.
Yeah.
It was like pretty obvious at the early stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And then a lot of people were spending a lot of time and money doing it, and there was a better way to do it. Right. So that part was never, there was never like, what problem do I want to solve? It was like someone literally called me and said, "This is what I'm doing," and I was
Right.
like, "That's crazy inefficient." And then I saw there were 1,000 other people doing it.
Right. But Leighton, one thing is that even though this was presented to you as a problem,
Yeah.
but converting this into a product, I think you had like a deep vision into it, right? A vision into like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years into the future
Yeah.
on how it should look like, right? I mean, that is very different from just a simple problem statement, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how did you kind of develop that vision, or what are some things that help you kind of visualize how the product should be or should look like?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's for me kind of I saw the pattern early on between what he was trying to do and what other parts of the media workflow were trying to do. So I saw that, hey, there's a similarity between what the creative person is trying to do and the account person is trying to do and what the media person is trying to do. And so, that's where I was like, okay, how do I simplify this for all three people?
So that's like how you kind of started out, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then, it became clearer and clearer that that wasn't a problem just in the marketing space. It's a universal kind of data processing issue. And then the challenge becomes, okay, how do we design an interface to make this simpler? And then given that kind of vision, how do we hire the best possible people to get to that vision as efficiently as possible?
I know building Tracer has been challenging, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you were all alone, right? You were the single person kind of building it, right? So I want to ask you, what is the biggest technical challenge that you faced while building this?
I think the biggest technical challenge for us isn't necessarily technical. It's that we are solving such a complicated such a complicated problem, right? So I think, if our product was, hey, we wanted to create a tool for two people to send each other messages, right? That's fairly straightforward. But if our mission statement is we want to abstract the way that anybody processes information, which is more or less what's happening within the walls of marketing, it's a fairly complicated workflow. So I think that's been the hardest part, is really figuring out, how do we do that at scale for everybody and still keep our runway narrow enough to be successful. So complex problem and trying to keep it a not too complex product.
So let's talk a little bit about a good software process, and the kind of importance it has while building software, like taking from requirements analysis to a complete software piece that is ready for shipping, right? So can you like tell me how important it is and how important it is for the overall efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, it's tremendously important. And I think it gets more and more important the larger you get, right? And the more clients you have. And that's the same kind of turning point that I talked about before with efficiency, where it's like, it's not how hard I work, it's how much, we can get done. It's the same thing on the process side. So like, it might be net faster for us to have less process in terms of going from ideation to, let's say, code in production, but long run, it's going to be far less efficient, right? So I think, the more thorough you can be at each stage, the better, as long as it's not so over the top that it's like stifling some level of like creativity or whatever it is.
Right. Okay. I mean, can you like briefly describe a good process to follow for like a startup? I mean, I don't think Tracer is a startup anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like a fully running company, right? But as you were starting out, I mean, what are some of the key areas that you focused in the whole process pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the early turning points for us was spending more time up front on the designing phase, right? So that there are high fidelity mocks that outline everything that's happening before engineers start building. And I think that was one turning point.
And like, did you like run it through your users or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we were also really fortunate in that we were at Vayner. So like our future users
Right.
were at our company at that point, and even today they're on our floor and we have access to them. So we have a really extensive opportunity for user testing. Um, so yeah, I think spending more time up front on designing kind of the workflow and the mocks was huge. I think formalizing the technical feature requirements prior to people writing code was huge. And I think, at every step of the way, um, we kind of broke out that process, right? If we had the process we had today when it was two people, that also wouldn't work.
Right.
Right. So it's not like there is a perfect process. It's there is a perfect, or there is a better process given the size of, the engineering team you're working on and the frequency with which you have to push updates and the expectations of the client and the complexity of the product. So like there is no like this is how it should work. I think there's things that you definitely want to have and boxes you want to check. But other than that, it's a function of a lot of other variables.
The reason that I'm asking you is that from what I've seen, even me, I'm guilty of this, right?
Yeah.
We kind of jump from problem statement to code, right? I think it's mostly a lack of awareness that this process exists, or maybe how much it increases the efficiency or the quality of the overall product. But yeah, I've seen. I mean, even I jump from this problem statement to code. So
Yeah, I mean it's harder to see when you're a one-man band, right?
okay. So I mean, then what were you like when you were 20 years old, right? Fresh out of college, like what were you thinking like your career would look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew that this would be where I would go,
Mhm.
either in terms of like Tracer specifically or even just the advertising space.
Mhm.
I think what I knew I was interested in was the process automation part of this.
Okay.
Right. So I think every, job I had, every internship I did, what I realized was I cared more about creating technology to automate what people were doing than the specifics of what any company was doing. Right. So I had like a job in finance where like I was supposed to create a lot of reports on emerging market data. And what I ended up doing was instead writing software. So instead of doing a report a week, at the end of the internship, I created 10,000 reports. Right. Like I was always more interested in like how do we define what is happening here, figure out the patterns, and abstract and code those patterns than I was in any particular industry's problems. So I jumped around quite a bit, but I think that's also why this was interesting to me, not because I cared about necessarily, working with social media platforms or our types of clients or advertising data, but because it was a interesting problem to kind of abstract and solve
Right.
that impacted a lot of people right away.
Right. So I mean, looking back today, what advice would you have for a software engineer starting out like me, or even what advice would you give to the 20-year-old Leighton? Like, give me like three things that you think that's important to build up, a successful career.
I think one is just to be patient in terms of when it's going to happen, right? Like I could have looked forever and I never would have found, the company that I started working at. It came because my friend called me, right, and had this problem. So I think like you're not really sure when that kind of moment is going to hit. I think in terms of like things that you can do and actions you can take is really just building out kind of the toolkit so that when you do have the problem that you want to sink your teeth into, you're ready. Um, and I think the most important thing on the tracer side has been just not trying to solve it yourself, right? Like if there's something, there's always someone who you can bring in to help you and who you can ask and who you can get advice from.
So that's like collaboration, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, Leighton is a very busy person, and I really appreciate your time for doing this.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, go. You can follow Leighton on Instagram. He's recently started a new photography page there, so I'll link it in the description. You can go follow him there. And yeah, thank you so much. Hope we can do this again sometime.
For sure. Thanks.